Good evening.
Evening.
That's better. My name is Richard Cooper, and I am President and CEO of NY Spin. I would like to thank our sponsors. Big Visible has been a sponsor for several years, and we greatly appreciate their support. We were originally supposed to have this event last month at Kaplan, but then Hurricane Sandy came along. Unfortunately, Kaplan has an in-house event this evening, and so we appreciate that ThoughtWorks was able to step up and let us use this space. Some quick background regarding tonight's event. Earlier this year, I learned that I would be getting involved in my first Agile project, where pretty much everyone was only previously familiar with and comfortable with working in a waterfall environment. So I thought perhaps a good topic for NY Spin might be Agile in a waterfall environment. I searched the web and discovered there was actually a course on this very topic being taught in Florida. I contacted the school and they put me in touch with Simone Brown-Knight, who was giving the course. We couldn't quite coordinate a time that she could be here, and so we decided to try something a bit different this evening, a remote presentation. I know that Simone has a slide where she covers her background, so I'll be quiet now and say, ladies and gentlemen, Simone Brown-Knight.
Everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for this presentation of Waterfall versus Agile, winning the battle between two worlds. This has been a very interesting road with New York Spin and I, with Richard initially contacting me, and I'm so pleased that we were able to finally coordinate having this event. Congratulations to all of you for surviving Hurricane Sandy and for getting your power back, hopefully, and for getting your lives back. I am actually originally from New York. I am from Brooklyn, but I just could not be able to get there in order to do this presentation in person. But I still do miss New York. That is where my heart is. But right now, I am warm and toasty in Miami, and I'm not sorry about it. So, it's interesting how I came upon this topic for Agile versus Waterfall, because I'm a PMP. I'll just give you some background about myself. I founded a boutique consulting firm called Stock the Mind here in South Florida, and I'm an electrical engineer. I'm a certified project management professional. I'm also certified in Lean Six Sigma. I do a lot of public speaking for professional organizations in the Southeast area, for PMI, for chambers of commerce, all basically focused on one thing: improving business processes, and also, by default, improving revenue and reducing costs. So all of that comes along with the whole thought process of how do we keep the costs low, how do we improve efficiency, how do we get more speed to market. And when more and more people started to focus on Agile to make that happen, there were some typical questions that continued to come up over and over again. And so what I'd like to do in this presentation is answer some of those questions and really find out where you guys are right now in your organization. I hear many of you in financial services. What's happening with you in terms of implementing Agile? So today's discussion will focus on these four areas. When do you use Agile versus Waterfall? Because you don't always have to use Agile, of course. How do you select the right framework? Many people only use Scrum, neglecting the fact that there are additional 5 frameworks that you could use. And then, can Agile and Waterfall really work successfully and coexist in one organization? And then lastly, how do we improve and track implementation for the projects that use these particular tools? So that will be the focus of today's discussion. But before I go forward, I will first want to understand where you are in the room. How many of you currently work in an organization that is Waterfall and thinking about implementing Agile? Please give me a show of hands. Okay, your organizations are thinking about implementing Agile. Okay, and how many of you work in a Waterfall organization that is already fully using Agile? No, 1 or 2. Okay, a few of you. All right. So how many of you are just here to try to find out more about what this is and how it can coexist? Agile and Waterfall. Okay, so there's a fair split across the room. Okay, good. I just want to make sure that the information I'm presenting is not going to be too much into one direction, and we can all get something from it. So let's talk about the benefits of doing this. The benefits of Agile overall are increased value, delivering better software in faster time. That is really what we're doing, and we're using iterative processes to incrementally test and deploy working software as often as possible. So there are some value propositions that Agile basically brings to the table, and that is having your visibility here in red, Agile in red, and then Waterfall in the bottom of these graphs in the black line. Looking at visibility, you can see that the visibility with these iterative processes of Agile stay high. They start high and they stay high. Versus with Waterfall, you start high, it gets low, and then it gets high again. Why? Because with Agile, you have the iterative process and you have the customer involved right from the beginning. So you have that high visibility. When it comes to business value, with Agile, you start low and end high. And with Waterfall, it's the exact opposite. You start low. I'm sorry, it's the same thing. You start low and you end high, but it's a little bit different. Again, you have a lot of customer involvement that's required with Agile processes. So when you have the customer involved up front, you're going to get a better product at the end. But you'll see that with Agile, you get there faster. You get the better value faster than you do with a Waterfall process. When you look on the right-hand side of the graph, and you look at adaptability, the adaptability stays high with Agile because, again, you have the iterative process and you have the customer involved right up front. So you're taking additional requirements and you're making changes as more knowledge is gained for your project. So you maintain that at a high level of adaptability. And lastly, when you look at the risk graph, with Agile, with both of them, they start high with the risk and they end low. But the difference again is you have less risk at happening with Agile only because again you don't wait until the end to get the customer involved and change any additional features and metrics. You're working on that right away, so you have a better risk curve with Agile. So these are some of the values why so many organizations are really hot on the trail of really should we do this, especially when you're looking at financial services. There's so many things changing, architectural, software development, all of that. And they're looking at how can we get to market faster and faster. There's no accident why companies like Apple are rolling out a new iPhone, which seems to be every 6 months. I know it doesn't come to market every 6 months, but believe me, they've already planned that release of what's coming up for the next several years and have us all hanging on the end of a thread waiting for what that next hot thing is going to be on that Apple product. So really what that does is it ties directly back to the corporate strategy. And what do I mean by that? Well, this is a great map that's illustrated from version 1 software that talks about how Agile and business strategy ties together. At the very top of the map, top left, you see strategy is the outer ring, and you have the corporate vision and goals, and that is going to set the tone for everything. Once you have the corporate vision and goals and you figure out what products you're trying to release, then you come into your release planning and your product vision and figure out what features are going to be released when. Once you've got that, then you go into your iterative cycle, your sprint planning, and now you start to put in place your sprints for the different projects, and then your daily Scrum if you're doing Scrum, and then you move through continuous improvement. But at the end of the day, you've got to come back to the corporate strategy. If that is not directly tied to whatever you're working on, whether that be Waterfall or Agile, then you're going to end up with this disarray, these massive questions in your organization, and people trying to figure out why are we doing this. And one of the main reasons projects fail the effort to take on Agile fails initially is because, one, companies do too much too soon. Two, there's not a good strategic tie between why you're doing Agile and why you're moving away from Waterfall. And three, there's not a good communication plan. So many businesses have already fully bought into the Waterfall PMI type methodology by getting people certified, getting all the training done, keeping up with CDUs, sending people to conferences. And now we're asking them to make this major switch into something else, into Agile. And so there's got to be a great communication plan and a great corporate strategy to understand and to explain to everyone why we're doing this. And again, I can't stress enough, if you roll out too many things too quickly, people as human beings are just going to reject it. Humans don't like a lot of change too quickly, and that's inevitably what happens. How many of you have already been in organizations that have been trying to roll out Agile and it was unsuccessful? Can I see a show of hands? How many of you are there right now? Okay. Well, it's going to be an interesting ride when you get to that point where there's going to be some pushback as to the Agile rollout. So let's continue to go into the whole thing with corporate strategy. And I want to start here because my main focus areas with my consulting firm is tying corporate strategy to project management and process improvement tools. So that means enterprise project management, Lean Six Sigma, Agile, all of that. And if there is no great corporate tie, then it won't work. So again, we're starting with the business strategy, and then you move from there into your product and project portfolio. And then these are your strategies enablers. Then when you look down at this last row of the table of the slide here, you see these cost controllers, these process improvement tools. And Agile is just one of the tools that you can utilize to improve processes at your organization. It is not mutually exclusive from the others. So it's not to say that once you're taking on, your organization is taking on Agile, that you have to then throw something else out. What you have to do is to find a way to peacefully coexist. So let's talk about, finding the right tool for the job. So how do we select the right framework for Agile? All right, well, really, again, what is the whole point here? The whole point, again, is providing better software more often. This is a cute little cartoon that I came across, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but in the first panel it says, there's chicken and pig talking, and chicken says, "Hey, pig, I was thinking we should open a restaurant." And pig says, "I don't know, what should we call it?" In the center tile, you see that there's a little thought bubble there, and chicken says, "Well, how about ham and eggs?" And the last tile, pig is saying, "No thanks, I'd be committed, but you'd only be involved." So what does this really mean? It means that pig has more skin in this game for a restaurant called ham and eggs than chicken. Chicken gets to lay the eggs and then walk away, whereas pig has to actually die in order to participate in this process, more or less. So I want to compare that to the Agile process and to project management in general. Because what happens is the chickens are our leadership team, our customers. They're laying these idea eggs, and they're laying them, and they're laying them, and they're laying them, and then they get to walk away. We are the pigs. We are the ones that are actually doing the work. This is the Agile development team, the Scrum Masters, the product owners. We're the ones that are actually doing the work. So we have more skin in the game, and we are committed to this process. It's easy to lay an egg and walk away, but what we need to do is and what Agile does is to get the chicken more actively involved in the process, to get them to have more skin in the game. And that's why so much customer interaction is required in Agile development. So when it comes to the next thing, which is Agile, I mean, I'm sure by now many of you already know what the real definition of Agile is. It's more, again, about a lightweight framework, rapid delivery. This was developed back in 2001 by 17 representatives from different software development methodologies, and they decided that they needed a more lighter weight type of methodology for software development, for something that would allow them to get to market much faster. So they came up with Agile and came up with the principles of software development. There are actually 12 Agile software development principles. These are only 5 of them that I think are really relevant and focused, especially on the topic for today, which is Agile versus Waterfall and combining them together. So I just want to quickly go through this list and just highlight a few things. First of all, highest priority, that is continuous software delivery. That's a little bit different from where we're looking at Waterfall, where we're not doing continuous delivery of features of output or work or deliverables. With Waterfall, you're delivering something at the end. So having continuous delivery of working software is something that's definitely different from Waterfall and needs to be paid attention to. Secondly, welcoming changing requirements. Now that is a bucket of water if I've ever seen one when you look at a Waterfall team, because you're not used to accepting changing requirements late in the game very often. Thirdly, developing working software frequently. So this is delivering something every couple of weeks. Again, extremely unusual for a Waterfall team. Number four, working software being the primary measure of success. So we're not talking about percent complete as the primary measure of success. We're talking about actually delivering working software. And then the last thing that I want to point out is that you have self-organizing teams in Agile, especially when using Scrum. Again, very different from Waterfall. It's not the top-down approach that most people are very used to. So how do we bring these diametrically opposed methodologies together under one roof? Well, first, we need to remember the 3 S's when bringing this enormous type of change to an organization. And that is, first of all, you want to do it slowly. You want to do it at a small scale at first. And lastly, you want to show off. So do it slowly, small scale, and then show off. You want to show off the win, because that is what is going to help you to get more buy-in and get more of the leadership team and more of the development team on your side to be able to bring Agile into your shop. Okay? So the next question is, when do you use Agile versus Waterfall? And really, to make that decision, you want to ask yourself this key question that we have in blue at the top of the screen. And that is, are iterative releases of functionality allowed? In other words, can you deliver the work in pieces? If the answer is no, you can't deliver the work in pieces because there may be too many dependencies or you have too many sequential pieces, then the answer is no. You cannot use Agile development to do whatever that project is. It's just going to be too confusing and you're going to end up abandoning it. So that's one question. Another question to ask yourself is your customer going to be heavily involved in this? If you can't get the customer to come to the daily meeting or to be very involved, then you're doomed to fail right away in using these Agile methodologies, because that is the requirement of success, is having that customer interaction in order for the iterative process to work and in order for you to be able to deliver that value and the just-in-time features and output. So looking at some characteristics of the 2 different types of methodologies, Waterfall, as we know, very project-heavy, lots of documentation. You got that clear project manager in charge, and it's very sequential. Whereas with Agile, you have more of an iterative process. Work is very self-directed and a lot of customer interaction. So again, you want to ask yourself that key question at the top and ask yourself also if the customer will be frequently involved. And if the answer is no, then you do not want to use Agile for that particular type. So the next question is, if you are using Agile, which framework should you be using? So many of us are only familiar with the 3rd framework on this list, which is Scrum. And there are an additional 5 frameworks that you could be using depending upon what the project is. So I want to now go into some of these different frameworks briefly and talk about how to select which one is going to be best for you. So first of all, I want to understand, how many of you in the room have ever used extreme programming? Okay. What about lean software development? All right, well, those are definitely some great options that you can use for your project in terms of these Agile frameworks. Extreme programming is really about continuous testing and improvement. So if you have a project that has a lot of uncertainty, that is a great way for you to go, especially a new product. Extreme programming is great. It uses a lot of tandem programming, and it uses these small programs called spikes to do troubleshooting, where you build this small program specifically to help you fix a technical issue. And this spikes are crude code, it's throwaway code, it's just to test a specific problem. But if you're working on a lot of new projects, extreme programming is a great way to go. Lean software development is about focusing on, eliminating waste, just as lean manufacturing. So lean is delivering more value in less time, and it really is about process improvement, and cutting down on the waste that may be existing in a particular process. So if you're working on improving projects or improving any products that are already out on the market, definitely lean is one of those ways that you want to go in terms of using this Agile methodology. Looking at Scrum is really good for projects that you have self-directed teams, or you allow the teams to be able to figure out what tasks they're going to work on in the particular sprint. And it's really good for projects that have rapidly changing requirements. So that, because it allows you to choose what the stories and figure out the budget, and I'll go into what I mean by sprint budgets later on, Scrum is good for projects with rapidly changing requirements. Then you have Crystal. Crystal is another type of adaptive methodology that uses what's called osmotic communication, which is where people are basically set up in the same room, sort of like a war room. And they are to learn from each other and pick up best practices just because of proximity. So Crystal is good for projects that are unique and people are not really sure how to go in terms of developing the particular architecture. So there are a few different practices within Crystal family of methodologies. There's Crystal Clear, Crystal Orange, and the Crystal Yellow. And but they're all based on being in the same proximity with people, and they're great for projects that don't have a lot of clarity in terms of how to proceed. Then you have DSDM, Dynamic Systems Development, which is really delivering delivering features just in time based on business needs. So it uses what's called Moscow rules to prioritize the work. And Moscow rules really are must-have, should have, could have, and won't have at this time. And DSDM delivers the most powerful 80% of the system in 20% of the time. So let me repeat that. It delivers 80% of the system in 20% of the time. And the reason why that works is by using those Moscow rules, that prioritization. That is a key principle in using DSDM. And this is really good for projects where you have a very large scope and you have limited time to work on them. So don't forget about DSDM as one of those tools that you have in your tool belt for Agile. And lastly, you have feature-driven development, where you develop different models models of different features in order to roll out the end product. And feature-driven development, again, is good for large projects where you don't have a lot of information, and you focus on breaking down large features into smaller scopes. So projects with a very large scope, feature-driven development is very good for that because it allows you to break down what you do. And it has 8 different practices, which I won't get into, that basically assigns different teams to things so that you can break down that project. So as I go through this, I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and we will have a Q&A moment at the end. But I want you to maintain these 6 methodologies in your memory because they are so important, and it is really great to identify what projects you generally work on and focus on bringing perhaps that particular framework into your organization and use it effectively. So the next slide covers things that we already know about the whole iterative processes of Agile. So you have your backlog here, you have, and this is coming out of your release plan and so forth, and then you have your sprint backlog of what needs to be worked on in this particular sprint, and you do your daily meeting, and then you have your end product. So again, the iterative process is involved in all of the frameworks that I mentioned earlier, but this focus here with Scrum is something that I know many of you have implemented in addition to whatever else may be there, and that's because it can be applied along with all of the other methodologies and frameworks that I mentioned earlier. So again, with selecting the right framework, you've got to understand about what the project is trying to do. What are you trying to deliver? Once you can answer that, then you can answer this question, which is which framework do you choose? So the key question you want to ask yourself is, what is the purpose of the project? If it is about new applications, then you're going to be looking at extreme programming, feature-driven development, and DSDM, because those projects, those methodologies are for projects that have some level of the unknown, because these are new applications and you're trying to work through them. You're coming up with small tests to go through troubleshooting. You're breaking down large projects into smaller features, and then you're working to deliver the most of the work in 20% of the time. So that's what's happening with those three options. If you're working on a product enhancement project, then you can look at the Crystal framework. You can look at feature-driven again, and then lean software development again, because you're taking out the waste, and you may also be creating something that's new on top of that. So Crystal works well with that type of project. If you're working on maintenance projects, then generally, again, you're looking at cutting out waste from the project. So lean is good for that again. And then product automation, again, lean, and then DSDM. So you'll notice that lean is good in a few different places here. So that is definitely one of the ones that is a go-to. And extreme programming as well, because so many of us are rolling out new projects very often. And again, Scrum can be applied to all of these methodologies. So when it comes to working within a Waterfall organization, the question is now really, can they coexist? And the answer is yes, they can exist together. I want to just tell you about an experience I had with a client, and this was a few years ago, where a very large financial services firm contacted me saying that they wanted my firm to give them some help with implementing Agile within their organization. This was now March that I was speaking with them, and they had started working on a project that would be using Agile since that January. And they were having some issues with delays and looking for some additional help in terms of direction for the project. And so they wanted my firm to work with them in bridging the Waterfall and Agile methodologies within the organization, working with their project manager to get them up to speed so that they can take over and begin to manage the project within 90 days, and also help them to define their current processes, business processes, and then define the new business processes that would happen after Agile and this new product was rolled out. Now, here's the situation with this organization. They had limited processes in place. They had no knowledge of Agile project management. Their project manager did not know how to use Agile at all, and he didn't even know how to use project planning software like Microsoft Project. He was very unfamiliar with it. So they had no schedule, no project schedule in place. They had no documentation at all listed for their current processes. And they had limited process flow information. So it was just a complete mess, to say the least. And I had enough sense to know that my company was not going to take over this entire project because it was just going to be crazy. On top of that, their CEO, CFO wanted this entire project initially rolled out by the date 10/10/10. So I asked them, wow, that's a really cool date. How did you come up with this date? They said, well, it sounded great, 10/10/10. Isn't that a great date to end the project? So I already knew that we were in big trouble at that point. By the time I had worked with them, they were already 3 months into what was supposed to be a year-long project, and nothing had been done. When we looked under the hood, it was just a mess, and basically it was actually a project that would require 18 to 24 months to be complete. So they were grossly off. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because they decided that they wanted to bring in a new methodology, Agile, to work on a large project that would be the future of their business. And they thought that it was just going to come out in a year, and they just picked that date out of the sky. That is exactly how you do not want to do it. And on top of that, we realized that there were some additional challenges because the customer internally in the business was rarely involved. They canceled numerous meetings, and we couldn't continue to plan sprints around them because there were only 3 weeks out of the month in that business because the last week was reserved for sales processes. So it was just really crazy. At the end of the day, they scaled back the project. They broke it up into phases and then implemented the first phase and postponed the other 2 phases. And just the first phase of the project took them a year to implement. So that is a cautionary tale for you. Don't bring in too much too soon. Don't try to pick the project, the largest possible project to first implement Agile. And understand your customer. If your customer is not going to be involved, then perhaps this is not the right time to roll out Agile within your organization. So let's talk some more about the transition for those of you working in organizations that are looking to make the transition to Agile. Well, first of all, it's difficult to communicate when people don't speak the same language. And Agile and Waterfall don't speak the same language. You have the sponsor is now the product owner, the schedule is now the sprint plan, deliverables are now features. You know, you have all of these different changes, and there's really got to be some translation that happens to sort of get everyone on the same page, especially when it comes to not only the 2 teams, the Waterfall team and the Agile team, but also when it comes to the executive team. People have also got to understand how success will be viewed differently. That was now delivery of working pieces of software and not percent complete, that there's going to be this daily meeting, and it is daily, and that people are required to be there, and the customer is expected to be there, and that there's so many different moving parts. So there's really got to be a great effort on communication and sort of acclimating people to the Agile environment so that there isn't a large revolt. So when it comes to the 2 methodologies working together, you have these 2 different pieces. You have the PMBOK Waterfall methodology on the left, and then you have the Agile methodology on the right. Now, if you look at the information on the bottom of your screen, you're seeing that the initiating process is now envisioning and planning is now speculating, but it is all the same thing. It's just using different language in order to incorporate it. So, again, going back to tying Agile to the strategy, you want to implement it as part of your long-term product plan. So you have this overall product vision of what you're going to be doing with this product. So, for instance, if we're talking about a cell phone, you know, it's going to have these overall grandiose features. Maybe it'll work on the GSM network, and it'll, you know, be able to do video in WebEx and all of these other things. And then you have your roadmap of when you're rolling things out, and then your release plan, your iteration plan, et cetera. But it's got to be tied together. Now, having this information doesn't mean that there's no project plan when it comes to Agile. You can still have a plan, and you can still have that plan work directly together with Waterfall. So let's look at an example of how something like that can work. And I hope you can see this slide clearly on the screen. At the top, it starts with the overall organizational vision. And then from there, you come down to your business goals. And those goals are then going to drive your sprint plan, your release plan, and then your features, and then your story. So as an example, here's how that would look. The vision for this particular company, an e-banking provider, is to be the provider of choice for small businesses. So that's the overall corporate vision. Now, the goal that is being displayed here as an example is that they have a goal to increase retention on the e-banking website. Now, this could easily be the credit union that I bank with, because I see them going to e-banking and rolling out a lot of mobile banking features like gangbusters. So their vision is to be the provider of choice. Then the goal that they're focusing on right now is retention on the e-banking website. So what does that really mean for this particular release or epic? So for this particular release, what we're going to work on is to add a customer center that's self-servicing for customer needs. And this is all e-banking again. So the features that are going to be part of this particular release are going to be for a customer to be able to access historical statements, for a customer to stop payment on the e-banking site, and then for a customer to find a location through the website. Now, that particular feature has stories associated with it, and those are the stories that you see on the very bottom of this slide. So first customer story is going to be able to find a branch. Another customer story is a branch that has a specific address. The third customer story is that one that services small businesses. And then the fourth one, as an example here, is, branching combination of find a branch by any combination of all the other things that we talked about before. So breaking down from the corporate vision down to even the story level, you can get a sense of how this may work. But now you have to translate this information into a project plan, as the Waterfall team would do, and also as the business leadership team, the executive team, would need to see. So again, that's just going back to the main example that I had before. So how does that look? Excuse me. So how does that look? You would have your overall release plan, and each iteration would begin and end with a milestone. And that whole process would incorporate what a waterfall team would normally do, the analysis, design, coding, and testing. So what you can do is, again, think of you have the beginning pieces of your product. Think of it, your project, think of it as a phase, and a release is a phase. And then within the release, you know how long the iterations are within your organization. What you don't know is how many iterations are part of a release. That comes down to understanding sprint budgeting. Sprint budgeting means how many story points can you work on within a sprint? How many work hours, if you will, do you have within a sprint? And understanding what features need to be rolled out. When you know how many features need to be rolled out, and you know what the budget is based on your staff and based on how many story points are allowed, then you will understand how many iterations you have going on within that sprint. You, as the Waterfall team, does not need to know every single piece or every single detail that's part of each iteration. All you need to know is when does it begin, when does it end, and how many of them there are. You can plan a project based on that information and think of the iteration as a black box. You just need to know the beginning and the end. Now you can come up with a project schedule that uses the same waterfall process that you're used to without having to know every single detail of what's happening within each iteration. The reason why that's really important is because things change within Agile all the time. That's why it's called Agile Project Management. So you don't want to drive yourself nuts with all of the changes from the waterfall side, nor do you want to drive your executive team nuts trying to figure out all of that either. So this is a great sort of framework or just sort of snapshot of how you can do that. Think of a release as a phase. Put your number of iterations in there after the Agile team has figured it out. You know that you have 2-week sprints or you have 3-week sprints, and you put the beginning and end MCAPs as milestones, and you do your milestone reports with the Agile team and with the executive team, and now everyone can get a sense of where the team is in a language that they already understand, that they are already familiar with. So once we look at how to roll out projects from Agile point of view based on the strategy, and we look at how we can actually incorporate that as a project plan, now we got to look at how do we track projects? How do we manage the implementation and the collaboration of the Waterfall team and the Agile team? So there are some key metrics, first of all, that you want to define. Generally, you want to know how are you going to report, how will you measure success, and then where are you really starting from? This is the same things that we're already used to within Waterfall. And some typical project goals that you're going to have are going to be, of course, revenue building. So you're looking at speed to market, new products and product enhancements, and then you're looking at improving your overall product. You can now manage what's happening in a project team for Agile using a software called Team Foundation Server. How many of you have heard of Team Foundation Server by a show of hands? Okay. How many of you have used it? Okay. Now, many of you. Okay, a couple of you have used it. Okay, and it's a really great tool for managing Agile projects because it has the information that's already needed in terms of sprints and the sprint planning and story points and velocity and all of that stuff is already in there. Now, it still would be a standalone system if you're using Team Foundation Server outside of using Project Server or Microsoft Project. So the great news is that there is now an integrated way to manage them together. In the 2010 releases of Team Foundation Server, Project Server, and SharePoint, there is an engine that integrates them all. And this is the way it works. You first define your deliverables as usual within Project Server. You publish your plan to Project Server. It then goes down to the second level, updates the Team Foundation Server information and that project manager or Scrum Master. And then the team now can go and plan their information. So they take the initial task that or iteration that you have already put in place as a skeleton within your project plan from the Waterfall side, and now they can do their own project planning for their capacity, for the story points, for the features, and break down everything for testing and all of that, and put it within Team Foundation Server, so that the PM there or the Scrum Master there can manage everything, and then they report it back. They publish their plan, and it comes back up to steps number 6 and 7 into Project Server, and that work is now published to Project Server as a full integrated plan. So now the project manager on the Waterfall side can see what is happening on the Team Foundation Server side and can report on it in an integrated way. In order to make this happen, you've got to have a few pieces in place. So you've got to have Visual Studio or Team Explorer, those clients for Team Foundation Server. That's a plugin and it's free, and you can get that. You also have got to have the 2010 version of the software, as I mentioned, for Team Foundation Server and Project Server. And you must also install the Project Server Integration Feature Pack in order for this to work well together. Now, the other piece of that, too, is that it also does integrate with Microsoft Project, of course. That's what's working together with Project Server. So Team Foundation Server has these built-in templates to allow you to do these things, the managing the backlog, the sprints, the capacity, all of that, very simply, very clear to understand. And it's a really great tool and allows you to do estimating and everything that you would normally do by hand or manually, but now you can do it with Team Foundation Server, and now you can also have the reporting piece of it, the tracking piece of it integrated with Project Server. Working with MS Project, if you, as I said, install the feature pack and the plugin tools that I mentioned, you can go to the File toolbar and choose Project Team, and this is where you can import project information from Team Foundation Server by clicking on that button. You can also see what's happening with the project team, and in the integrated view with your Waterfall project, once you import the information, and you can see there, and then use different views like you would normally use different views to see different types of information. So you have your work ID, which is all, this is all from Team Foundation Server, the reason for this new item, what state it's in, if it's a to-do, if it's new, if it's in progress. You can see the remaining work hours. So now you have a really great tool to be able to view and track what's happening in the Waterfall side as well as on the Agile side. So the last piece of this is communication. How do you bridge the communication gap? Because you still need to report out to your executive team and even to each other. So the SharePoint portal is part of that too, this whole integration piece. You can view your progress report, share documents, your testing results. You can have discussions. So you use SharePoint just as you did before, but now there is this additional automated reporting that happens in SharePoint based on the results of what's in Team Foundation Server. And again, you need the 2010 version for all of this work in addition to the plugins that I mentioned before. So now you've got the tracking piece, you've got the reporting piece, and you've got this great integration that you can now manage the implementation of the project and bring them all together with planning through Microsoft Project and Project Server. So integrated management, again, as I talked about before, you have the different pieces. So tracking in Team Foundation Server, tracking your project overall in Microsoft Project, and communicating in SharePoint. And this is an example of just, one of the burn down charts that you'd be able to see. And again, this is automated. You don't have to do anything else other than publish your information, and these reports would be visible in your SharePoint site. So when it comes to reporting, you want an integrated report. So the Agile components of that report is going to be, your release and your sprint burn down charts, when you just saw just a moment ago, the performance to your key metrics, your rate of defects, and also what percentage of your tests have been passed, and of course where you are in terms of the backlog of your features. And then with your waterfall component, you have your master schedule in terms of how these releases relate to the milestones that you have going, your sprint start and end dates, and your generally, the constraints, resources, actual versus plan. So you're able to communicate both the Agile side and the waterfall side simultaneously when you are able to integrate these tools successfully. So before we get ahead of ourselves and get excited about, I could use Team Foundation Server, I can integrate the whole thing, let's focus and back up for just a moment, because Agile requires a specific type of environment to be successful. And so the question is, are you in the right environment? Is there a lot of collaboration? Is there frequently delivering software that required? And are people going to be able to accept frequent change? And if you're not able to accept the change, there's not a lot of collaboration, or that you don't have to frequently deliver software, working software, then perhaps you're not in the right environment to even bring in Agile. And then, of course, you have to watch out for some of these main pitfalls. The initial decrease in productivity sometimes is a really big issue with teams, with leadership teams. And so they get discouraged and say, well, this Agile thing is not working because we're not moving as fast as we were before. But the reasoning is because people have to adapt. The entire organization has to adapt. So there is an initial decrease in productivity. The management team may be reluctant to surrender control to a team that is going to tell them what stories and what features can go into the next sprint. That is a big problem that has to be navigated around as well. And then HR involvement is really needed because of the training requirements that goes along with this, and making sure that people get all of the information they need to be successful. So product owner training, Scrum Master training, estimating and planning, those are really big tools of this. And if you haven't had any training in proper estimating and planning, or there aren't any certified product owners or Scrum Masters, then I really would implore you to try to get some of that training brought in-house, because it will help you to be much more successful much faster than not having it. Just in closing, to wrap things up, I just have a few takeaways for you, and then I'm going to open it up to Q&A in just a few seconds here. So get your questions ready, and I will ask you to approach the phone so that I can hear your question clearly, because I hear that because of the room, the noise sort of bounces around, so I need you to approach. So key takeaways. Agile is a lightweight framework, requires continuous delivery of software. That's the main thing. There are 6 iterative methodologies, and mainly you're going to be delivering stuff every 2 to 4 weeks, so you want to choose the right framework based on what your projects are. Is this a new application? Is this for maintenance? Figure that out, and then you'll be able to figure out which framework is best for your project, or which framework should you focus on bringing in-house. And then you want to connect your Agile performance and product delivery to your overall business strategy. If there isn't a very strong connection to what products are being delivered and what the release plan is, then there's going to be a lot of questions as to why we're doing this, why we're moving from the way we were doing it before, and then there's going to be a lot of hemming and hawing, and then your implementation will end up not being successful or will take a lot longer than it really should. So think about these takeaways and think about the question of if you're in the right environment for Agile, and then figure out whether or not it's going to be really worthwhile for you to push this within your organization. So Richard and Bill, I'm now ready to open the floor up to Q&A. So you can take me off mute, and let's hear what people thought. Well, first of all, was the information presented what you all expected? Yes, no?
We're getting a lot of yes nods here.
Yeah.
Whoops, there you are.
Okay. What piece of information stands out in your mind from what I presented today?
Anybody? You need to come up.
Nazar, quick question. In a highly regulated environment where you're making software that's safety critical, SIL 3 or SIL 4, for example, what would you recommend in terms of software methodology?
For that type of environment, I would say dynamic systems development and even feature driven, because it allows you to deliver the most in the least time. Does that answer your question?
Feature driven. Could you be more specific?
He needs a little bit more elaboration on feature driven.
Oh, okay. Feature driven is all about when you have large scope projects and you need to you have a lot of features to deliver. So it allows you to break down the project features into smaller pieces and prioritize what needs to be delivered, and so that you're just able to deliver 80% of the value in 20% of the time. So I say feature-driven because of the speed, and you mentioned being critical, and dynamic systems development, DSDM, because of the prioritization, also focused on things being critical.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bill, come up.
Hi, Simone. I appreciated your comments today. I was really interested in what you say about reporting, because I'm just picturing in a number of organizations, as reports go up the chain, you get to people who are less and less familiar with really what Agile is. And suddenly they see this something new in the report, and they, what advice do you have in terms of people promoting up the chain appreciation of knowledge?
Keep it simple. Things people can understand information like the velocity being, in parentheses, productivity, and the burn down chart being, work remaining. So if you don't have the integration with SharePoint that I mentioned before, keep it simple, because you can do those in Excel. And even if you do have the integration I mentioned with SharePoint and Team Foundation Server, again, you want to show them the pictures. Show them the pictures and let them focus on that. That's why executives love the red, yellow, green report, because their eye just goes immediately to the yellow and the red, and they don't have to ask questions to the other. So the more pictures and graphs that you can put in front of people's faces that are very simple, the better it is. I know that may sound like a really simple answer to you, but that is the best advice, because that's what I have seen to work in many different organizations.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question. You mentioned earlier in the presentation version 1. Do you have any thoughts about that? And the same, to some degree, the same question as Bill's, how to use that tool to make it clearer to management without them misunderstanding some of the information that's presented.
So was that the question?
Yes, the question was using version 1 in an Agile environment, and having management that has previous experience with only Waterfall, understanding some of the data provided by a tool like version 1.
Well, no, I was not necessarily endorsing version 1 as a tool. I was saying that their demonstration of the linkage of strategy and value is a really good demonstration. It's a really good pictorial to use to explain what's really happening. And let me go back to that slide just to sort of refresh everyone's memory. Are you talking about this slide, Richard? This map with the circles on it that had strategy, release, iteration, is the Agile development map. Is that what you're talking about?
Right, I know you mentioned it, so I thought perhaps you had some insight into the tool itself.
No, I was just showing that that is a really good pictorial, a good visual when explaining what Agile is to the leadership team and the linkage between the business strategy.
Okay, are there other questions?
Hi, Simone. My name is Chris Bott. I'm currently consulting at a large financial firm. And we're strictly Waterfall right now, though we have some other departments who claim to be doing Agile. We'll be looking into how they're doing things. Will your slides be available for us?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. One of the things that concerns me is with the with Waterfall, what we find ourselves tied to are artifacts that are produced during the waterfall. The BRD leading to the SRD, leading to the QA plan. And by the end of the project, you have internal audit going through and looking for those documentations. And I'm just a little concerned about, is Agile able to keep up with the documentation requirements that audit may require? Do you find that particularly challenging?
That is an excellent question about the documentation. What we've done is to create a sprint that is just about documentation because of what you just said. The documents are needed for audit, but Agile is not about documentation. It's about doing.
Right.
So a lot of that documentation development that happens up front in Waterfall is not supposed to be happening with the Agile process. It either happens just after the sprint is passed and things or the release is passed and things are delivered, or we do a sprint at the end of the whole process, and that's when the documentation is developed. Does that answer your question?
Yes, except that one other thing that the documents are used for is not only for audit, but also to get approval from the business clients to proceed to the next stage.
Well, the question is how detailed does that initial documentation for approval have to be?
I see.
How detailed? I think if you can get agreement in a basic outline for the documentation to move to the next sprint or the next release, then that would help you to then keep the speed. Because if you're able to do that well, what will happen is you'll find that the Agile team will be moving much faster than the documentation.
I know. I think everyone in our field hates to do the documentation. So,
Me included.
all right, it's our least favorite thing to do. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Well, I resemble that remark because I do a lot of documentation. But anyway, come on up. Come on up.
Hello,
So,
I'm Susan Ferenczi, and
Louder.
what I'm wondering about with this documentation balance versus actually producing stuff is how do you retain the knowledge that you've gained in the course of building bits and pieces of software?
very good question. I use cheat notes, basically. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can literally make notes on the side with your own documentation, or you could do voice recorded notes where people do too. You can leave notes with your code. There's a few different ways. There is no standard way that I know of that people want to do that. It's just whatever works within the team.
The question is, how do you avoid reinventing what you've already done? How do you do this in a way that is somehow indexable or searchable so that when the team next door is going through one of their projects, they can leverage what you've already done?
What information system are you using to store your data, your information, your completed work?
We are not an Agile shop. We at the moment are using MKS Integrity to manage requirements.
Okay. So I think we really just kind of answered the question. For instance, I'm just going to tell you just as an example, if you're using something as simple as SharePoint or some other shared information management tool, you want to use meta tags. You want to use meta tags. You want to use come up with an actual storage system, filing system that you can put your lessons learned from each sprint in that and have it tagged so that people can look for that before they start working on something similar. And that's how you keep from redoing what has already been done, or use the benefit from the knowledge that was already gained. So you want to add the information.
All right, I'll just follow up with one more question. Here's an example of a company that doesn't communicate well within itself, has, gee whiz, has
We don't know those.
has multiple departments, each of whom, or many of whom, are doing virtually identical processes. How would we be able to recognize this?
Well, I'm going to start off by saying something silly. First of all, you have to talk. That's one thing. But you're saying that there isn't great communication across the departments. If there is no forum for you guys to get together and there is no information system with searchable content, then I mean, this is a back to basics question, to be honest with you. It's one of those things that you just got to. I can hear my mom going, well, keep it simple, stupid. Remember KISS.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. There is no whiz-bang solution for this other than there's got to be a forum for people to get together, whether that is a post-mortem or a retrospective, something that allows people to talk. And then, again, say, we're going to put our lessons learned here. This is where the repository is. And it's all tagged and cataloged by whatever type of project it is. Then it's not going to work.
All right, I think you gave me a great answer, which is find the corporate version of mom to say, you guys get together and talk. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Susan.
Other questions? Bill again?
What do you do? What do you suggest if you're interviewing and you get hired by a company where the person who calls himself a product owner is the roles are not really following the way they're defined, the way sprint is taught, and the way the sprint is in the Scrum rules are. Anyone looking up anything about Scrum will see that there's a distinct, separate person to be a product owner, and that has to be a different person from the Scrum Master. And that, so what do you do when you go to, you find out yourself joining or about to join an organization where these roles are mixed up, and especially like an example is someone who's a product owner is negotiating with people higher up in the product organization about the team's estimates.
Well, this reminds me of the example I gave of the financial firm client where the project manager didn't know how to be a project manager. This is where you have to do what I call the Jedi mind trick. You have to basically, you have to essentially manage from behind. There's a couple of things you can do. One is you can, basically play stupid. Say, hey, this organization operates a little bit differently than what I'm used to. I've seen it this way, and this is this way. How's that working for you? Because I can guarantee that person has a lot more workload than they probably really want. So you can approach it from I've seen it work differently, and this is probably a lot of pressure on you. How does that work? And basically go from that point of view. And the other way to do it is to say, hey, can we try out one project where the role is separate, even if it's somebody completely different doing something, because that may also work too. All you need is one opportunity to show them that this is madness. And then the third thing you can do is bring them to one of these talks at Spin and let them see how it's really supposed to work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation.
Hey, Richard and Bill,
Yep.
do me a favor, let everyone know that if they liked what they heard, and if you guys have a Twitter or Facebook account, it'd be great if they could tweet out their comments or any additional questions and use hashtag StockTheMind. Facebook and Twitter, same thing.